Hey folks, just a quick heads up that all episodes of the Film Nuts podcast contain heavy spoilers and some strong language. Nothing too crazy, but make sure there's no one with sensitive ears too close by. And if you like what you hear today, please consider becoming a patron of the show. You can find links to that page in the show notes, or you can visit patreon.com/filmnuts. Okay, anyway, please enjoy the show, and thank you so much for listening.
What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss?
Sir?
The most you ever lost on a coin toss?
I don't know. I couldn't say.
Call it.
Call it.
Yes.
For what?
Just call it.
I love every single little tiny thing about it. This movie, I think, is a masterpiece and is probably perfect. I don't know if it's possible to plumb a theme more deeply than this movie does, because it's doing it on every level while also being just an amazingly entertaining story. I think that that's what movies are designed to do and are supposed to do, and this just does it all.
Hi, I'm Taylor, and welcome back to the Film Nuts podcast, a show about why we love what we watch. If I sound a little different and if things look a little different around me, it's because I'm in a hotel room. I'm in Los Angeles right now for work, but I still have a really great episode for you all to listen to and watch. Have you ever gotten mad at a film for being so good? Like, how dare you movie? What gives you the right? A visceral reaction like that is a good indicator that whatever you're watching is affecting you. The dialogue, the visuals, the meaning, all these things draw us in, and when they're done really well, almost never let go. The Coen Brothers film No Country for Old Men, based on the novel of the same name by Cormac McCarthy, is a dark twist on Western tropes with a pessimistic outlook that does not sit well with some moviegoers. However, for my guest today, this film balances the art and science of filmmaking so well it makes her angry. Tricia Aurand is a screenwriter and podcast host who was blown away from the first time she saw No Country for Old Men in a packed theater. As someone who both writes and discusses films, like on her co-hosted podcast Beyond the Screenplay, Tricia is one of the perfect people to find both the entertainment and message behind this movie. Tricia and I talk about how No Country for Old Men diverts narrative structure, what defines a dad movie, and the purpose and intent that violence can have in films. So, hide the money in the air vents. Here's Tricia Aurand talking about No Country for Old Men on the Film Nuts podcast.
I am out here in LA. It is an interesting season in the town. So everybody that I know is out striking most days of the week. And it's kind of a wild time to be a part of the screenwriting industry.
Yeah. And you've been out there, right? You've been striking?
Yeah, full disclosure, I have a baby and a toddler, so it's been a little bit hard. I took the baby out once, and he actually did really well, but he was super young. He was 8 weeks old when I took him out there to the picket line. Oh, wow. And it was, he was doing his bit, and he didn't write anything, so he's really standing in solidarity with us, I would say.
Yeah, what an ally. That's awesome.
Yeah, he really is. Pencils down. Babies everywhere.
That's cool. Yeah. So how is, I asked this to a lot of people who are new parents basically on the show, or people who are like expecting parents, like how are you finding time to do what you need to do for your work, doing what you need to do as a parent, or doing what you need to do to keep your sanity? Like, how do you balance it all?
Help. You get help. My toddler goes to daycare 15 hours a week, and the baby we have that same amount of childcare. So while the toddler is at daycare, we have sitters that come and hang out with the baby here at the house. And then I tuck myself away in an office and try desperately to get at least 15 hours of writing done every week. It's not a lot. I'm writing really slowly on the things that I'm working on, which is frustrating for me. But it is absolutely essential to my mental health, and not to mention our household finances. So, it becomes worth it and making that a priority. I also have like things that I do, after the kids go to bed, of like just working on things for fun, or decompressing. I'm lucky enough that getting to watch movies is also part of my job. So, and getting to podcast about movies is also part of my job. So I do get to find time for those things also here and there. And it, like, sitting down to watch a movie and feeling like, oh, I have learned something from this experience is also like very lucky, where I get to decompress, but I also get to feel like I'm accomplishing something. So,
Are you someone who can sit down and just like start writing? Like, how prolific would you say you kind of are?
I mean, I write a lot, and I have written a lot. Can I sit down and start writing? More so lately, now that I have kids, and that has become absolutely imperative.
Okay.
I have 15 hours of childcare, and that is it. And so I cannot waste a minute of it. So I plop down in front of my computer and I do immediately start writing. And that was not my mode that I was in before I had kids. Listen, the amount of stuff that I can get done now when I don't have any children with me is astounding. I wish I knew that I had this capacity back in my 20s and early 30s. It was like, I would sit there and I'd be like, well, I maybe wrote like 5 pages today, and that's pretty good. And
you felt good about that.
I sat down and like got into the mode, and whatever. No, absolutely not. Like, we are off. It's like a starting gun goes off when I hand the baby over to the sitter, and I'm like, here we go. But it is working. I'm getting things written. It is. You just do what you have to do.
Yeah, I would. Now that like time is of the essence, basically, you're like, I gotta go.
Yeah, it is not an ideal way to work. I will say that.
Yeah,
and I do get distracted. I'm working in my home office, which I'm very lucky to have, but it's not soundproofed. Like, I can hear when the baby is crying in the other room, and it is not easy to just sit there and do nothing about that fact, even because I can hear the sitter is struggling or whatever, whatever is melting down, which things do. And so it's like, you kind of just have to say, this is the time I'm doing this thing. And I have constructed my whole life around that idea. And so I'm going to sit here and do it.
I have to ask you this.
Sure.
What is a dad movie? Explain it to me.
Okay, so I guess I'm talking, when I say a dad movie, I mean like a movie of our father's generation. Okay. So I assume you're a similar age to me. You're probably born in the 80s.
Yep, 87.
True or false? Great. Yeah, great. You're a little younger than me, but not by much. And yeah, so fathers in our generation are boomers. And it's like, and we're also both white people, probably from similar-ish like socioeconomic backgrounds. So it's like, what does a white boomer middle-class dad like? And it's, war movies and 70s comedies, like some Mel Brooks and like Robert Redford political thrillers, like Alan J. Pakula stuff, and anything that like scratches sort of a history itch. So like my dad's really into the Napoleonic Wars and like naval battles, and it's all of that. And that's definitely where I get my love of movies from, is from my father. And so if that's not a typical thing for a girl to like, then I don't know how to help you, because that's just what I grew up like watching and reading as well. So like I've read all those damn Master and Commander books, and the Horatio Hornblower novels, and all the James Bond books, and like, I don't know, that's just my whole jam.
So Westerns definitely fall in that category.
Big time.
Of dad movie.
Yep.
Yep. Have you shown your dad No Country for Old Men, or has he seen it on his own?
That's a really good question. I don't know if he has. I would be really curious to hear what he thinks about it. My dad is a Coen Brothers fan, but he's a very he definitely leans more toward their comedies. Like he really loves Raising Arizona. It's probably one of his favorite movies, and it's one of mine too. He even really loves Intolerable Cruelty, which like hardly anybody likes that movie or would name it as like their favorite Coen Brother movie, but my dad loves it. So he just is into their like wacky comedies. I don't know if he liked Hail Caesar, but you know what? He probably would have. Like if he had seen it, or that's like just the goofier the comedy, the better in his mind. I don't know how he feels about No Country. I remember talking to him about it a lot in the year that it won Best Picture. It came out in 2007, and then you know won 4 Oscars at the Academy Awards that spring winter. And I remember talking to him about it quite a bit, and about how much I loved and respected this movie. And yeah, I think it's just one of these things that can really unnerve you. Like, I think a lot of people didn't know what to make of it. And there's no question that ultimately it ends in this very sort of dark, nihilistic place. And if that's not something that you can appreciate, I don't know if you would ever come back to it. And it is pretty sparse is what I'm going to say. It doesn't leave you a lot. It doesn't leave you like a lot to sort of hold on to, or it kind of just chews you up and spits you out in a lot of ways. And I think it is infinitely rich for analysis. But if analysis is not your jam and you're like wanting to watch a fun movie, I don't know if No Country for Old Men is going to be the thing for you that you want to watch over and over again.
It's not a feel good.
Like, sort of, no, not at all. So yeah, I think there's that. And my dad is very much in the enjoys being entertained camp of people who appreciate the way that they appreciate movies. It's not that he is not like a big analyst or like couldn't engage in movie on that level, but that's not what he goes to movies for. He goes to movies for a good ride.
Right.
So, which, you know, dad movies often are. They're a literal ride on Western or on a submarine or on a tall ship, you know.
So why do you love No Country for Old Men?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me. I love every single little tiny thing about it. This movie, I think, is a masterpiece and is probably perfect.
What's in the satchel?
It's full of money.
That'll be the day. Where'd you get the pistol?
At the getting place.
Did you buy that gun?
No, we found it.
Willin',
What? Quit your hollering.
what'd you get for that thing?
You don't need to know everything, Carla Jean.
I need to know that.
Keep running that mouth of yours, I'm gonna take you in the back and screw you.
Big talk.
Keep it up.
The Coen Brothers have, you know, a lot of control over their films. They basically have complete control over their films. You know, they edit them themselves and obviously write and direct them themselves. Although this one is adapted from a book, obviously the novel by Cormac McCarthy. And the precision with which they put their movies together, and especially this one, is so refreshing and again just offers a wealth of like technique and literary sort of elements that you could just dive into forever, as well as a really harrowing, gripping story with really compelling characters and a very fascinating theme and a complete, like, I don't know if it's possible to plumb a theme more deeply than this movie does, because it's doing it on every level. And again, while also being just an amazingly entertaining story. So I think that that's what movies are designed to do and are supposed to do. And this just does it all.
I think for anyone listening to this who is familiar with you and your work, they would definitely say that Tricia Aurand is all about theme for films. Is there you appreciate this movie on a bunch of different levels. For you, what's the distinction between a theme working and you as Tricia loving what a movie has to say?
That's interesting. Well, first of all, I want to say that just like a disclaimer here, which is that I don't think I'm normal. I don't think the way that I watch movies is normal.
I don't think there's any wrong way to watch a movie though, unless you're just not paying attention to it.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm trying to say, which is that for me, theme is like what I come to film for, or it's the most compelling thing that I come to film for. Like, I really love being entertained. I love action movies. I love romantic dramas. I love movies in just about every genre, and I can appreciate what they're doing. However, the movies that like stay with me and that I think are like perfect films are the ones that are also exploring a theme with a great amount of depth. And I think in order to do that, you can't just do it in the dialogue or, do it in the costume design or whatever the like most surface level is. You have to do it all the way down into the very depths of what the story is. And that goes all the way as deep as genre. That goes all the way as deep as like form. And so I think that when a film has been put together with great care toward exploring the theme, that's when the theme is working really well. Now, I think that there are certainly movies that do that are exploring perhaps themes that I don't connect as strongly with. So like the theme of this movie I find to be very existential. The Coen Brothers are very much about, like, in their work, they often explore like God and like justice or karma, or they explore the nature of story itself, which is often concerned with how things end or the meaning that we take away from things. That's what theme is. So there's sort of this self-reflexive quality to it, which again is, I think, perfect for film. And of course, this all comes from Cormac McCarthy's novel too. But like when you're telling a story about storytelling or about the human desire for meaning within the context of narrative and narrative structure, that's something I'm going to connect to every time because I've built my whole life around trying to do that with my life. And so that's why a movie like this is going to get me every time. Now, I do think there is especially back in 2007, I thought that, there's this really deep nihilism to the conclusion of this movie, as I mentioned earlier. And I probably didn't all the way agree with it at the time. Like, I don't know if I would have called myself a nihilist back then, but darned if I am now. Like, I think that there's a lot. I think that there's a lot here where you can kind of see the Coen Brothers have throughout their filmography come back to some of the same kinds of thematic questions. And I find that this movie draws a very strong conclusion and does not leave a lot of room for wiggling in the interpretation. I think that it is very clear in where it lands on some of these existential themes. And so I really respect that, without being, it does all of that without being trite or offering nihilism as some kind of like, not that it ever is, but like an easy answer, right? The characters are really wrestling with like, what if this all means nothing? What if there is no justice? What if, it's all just chaos and inevitability and there's literally nothing we can do about it? And the movie is like, correct, it is. Great job, everyone. Everybody go home. So if that's, but again, it doesn't arrive at that cheaply. The movie wrestles with it, really struggles with it the whole time, and puts you as an audience member through that exact same thematic debate.
Why is, you're kind of touching on it a little bit here, but to you, especially with movies or even with anything that you work on, whether it's on a screen or written on a page, like, why is theme so important for you?
I just think that there should be a reason why we're telling a story, any given story. And which means it has to sort of like speak into life. At least ideally, again, like I like seeing stuff blow up. I like seeing beautiful actors kiss each other. Like I like these things. They are entertaining, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying there's no point to a movie that doesn't do theme or doesn't do it very deeply or something. And escapism is a really valid reason to want to go to a dark theater and sit there for a couple of hours. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And there's nothing wrong with like not inquiring too deeply into the themes that you're also being presented with. Like, I think if you just like this movie because it's a really thrilling Western, I think that is a really good reason to like it. And we don't have to talk about nihilism if you don't want to. You know, whatever. Like, that's fine. I'm sure that person exists, probably. But at the end of the day, I think that stories are capable of reaching us on levels that they are basically the only thing that's capable of reaching us on those levels. There's something really deep in our psychology that responds to a well-told story that's about something real. It's about these questions that we wrestle with all the time as humans. And there's almost nothing else that can unlock that part of our psychology besides narrative. And so if you have the opportunity as a storyteller to do that, then you should do it. And don't miss out on a chance to engage with something real, because that's how you change somebody's life that's sitting and watching your movie. If they're going to give you a couple hours of their time in their brain space, in their physical body, in the temporal universe we occupy, and you have that one chance to say something to them, you should say something to them about something real in their life, I think.
So, yeah, I really like that. So this like realness, this wanting for something to mean something. Like, did that, is that something that you were like taught? Was there a story that hit you in a way that you're like, there has to be purpose? Like, where, I mean, can you trace that back at all, do you think?
The short answer is no, I don't think so. I mean,
That's cool.
It just has, it occurred to me like a very, very long time ago that I'm just sort of wired this way. You know, I basically have wanted to be a writer since I was very, very, very young. Like, we're talking preschool aged young, like,
oh, cool.
And so, yeah.
What was preschool Tricia's story? What was her favorite story to write? Do you remember anything you wrote or drew?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, I definitely was writing like little books and stories. There's one from second grade, so that's not preschool, but that's like a story about a kitten who lost a ball of yarn down a hole, and she tries a few different ways to get it, and then she eventually succeeds. And
the theme is don't give up, right?
Yeah. Well, there's narrative structure there, right? There's like there's conflict, there's a hero, there's a clear goal, there's like different twists in the middle. I mean, it's right there. But yeah, and my favorite movie around that time would have been Sleeping Beauty, which was like my jam when I was really young, like probably 3 and 4. I watched that movie every day. So Walt Disney's, the animated classic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and that was just like I would write plays for the neighborhood kids, and I would direct them, and we would put them on. And I wrote a novel in the 4th grade. Like it's just cool. It's just the way that my brain is wired. But that's not to say that there isn't also study involved. Like, I did end up going to school for screenwriting. And then I was also an English teacher for many years. And so I spent a lot of time finding ways to articulate and teach like narrative structure and theme and analysis as well as writing itself. So that's definitely a big part of it. I think I remember, when I was, it was probably when I was less than 10 years old, I'd gone with my dad to see a movie. And I wish I remembered which one it was. But I was like, Dad, I think there are movies, like some kinds of movies are just trying to be fun to watch. And other kinds of movies are trying to be like about something and like trying to like, change you or say something or, I don't remember what I said, mean something probably. And my dad was like, you're right. He's like, what do you think would be like, he's like, do you think movies can be both? I was like, yeah, I think the really good ones are both. And, that was not something that I had the language that anyone gave me the language for. It was just something that I had noticed from watching movies myself. So I think that part of why I do what I do in terms of podcasting, and when I was teaching, and now when I volunteer with youth a lot, is giving people language to talk about film and TV, books on those levels where it's like, why does this particular bit really strike you? Why does this particular character's journey or transformation, why does that make you feel changed? Why does that make you cry? What is the language that we have around describing what we go through when we sit through or experience a story?
So going back to this movie, what do you remember your first experience watching this movie? Do you remember what the setting was?
I do.
Why are you giggling?
Because I was thinking about this because you sent me a list of questions and I was like, I guess I have to think about this thing now. I was in San Francisco with my college roommate. And I'm gonna call it a double date. Although we were just with a couple of guys that like, I think were old friends of hers. She was from the Bay Area. And so it was like a couple of her high school buddies that I had like met maybe once or twice when I was home with her visiting her family from college. And so we were out with these couple of guys. I'm going to call it a double date because there weren't enough seats in the theater and of four seats together. So I ended up sitting with one of these guys like near-ish to the screen in a totally separate place in the theater from my roommate and whoever else we were with. And so I was sitting next to somebody I didn't know that well. But I do remember like everybody in the audience, including me and him, were like really vocally reacting to watching this movie because it's such an experience and was such an experience in the theater at the time among people who had never seen it before. I mean, think about the way that the tension is drawn out in some of these scenes and sequences. Yeah. Where like you're just very sure something really bad is going to happen imminently, but you don't know exactly when or what. Like even just that opening scene where Moss finds the drug deal gone wrong, right? And he's just walking around. He's got his gun, his rifle at like basically hip level. And he's just like walking slowly through the thing. And then the camera like sort of lifts up and pushes in on that shattered window, the passenger side window of one of those trucks, which it turns out the guy that's in there is the one who asks for water, right? But like it's shattered so you can't see what's inside. And the camera kind of pushes in on it. You're just, the first time you see this, you are so sure that whatever is in the cab of that truck is just going to be a horror show. And it kind of is, but not in like a jump scare way. But you don't know that going in. The movie is just stretching that moment out slightly longer than it needs to, enough to make you uncomfortable.
You speak English? Where's the last guy? Ultimo hombre, last man standing. There must have been one. Where'd he go? I reckon I can go out the way I come in.
Cierra la puerta. Hay lobos.
There ain't no lobos.
The other thing is that when things do happen and there are these explosions of violence and chaos and all this stuff, they often just come out of nowhere, or they escalate without giving you a sense of like cinematic. They're very cinematic and they're very well paced, but they're not cheapened by like music coming in or like a lot of cinematic language to signal to you that shit's about to get real. It doesn't happen that way. It just things happen. So when Moss goes back out to the same site to take that guy water, he keeps looking back at his truck on the ridge. Like, he looks back at it a couple times, and you can see it gorgeously outlined. Roger Deakins is ridiculous in this movie.
Yeah.
It just makes me angry. It's so good. But like, Moss's truck is parked up on that ridge, right? And there's that gorgeous blue light behind it.
Yeah.
He looks back at it like once or twice, and you're just like, yeah, your truck is there, Moss. You're fine. Like, and he goes to take that guy water, and then there's that one time he looks back up there, and there's just another truck up there on that ridge right next to his. And you're just like, oh shit, like, he's in so much trouble. But the full weight of it, like, falls down on you as it's falling on Moss, right? Of like how bad this is about to be. And the way it's shot, it's all like again, a cheaper version of this, or like a less studied filmmaker might have like gone to a close-up of the guys that are in the other truck, and they like slash his tires, and which they do, right? But it doesn't go to a close-up. It keeps you in Moss's POV. You can see the truck on the hill. You hear way off in the distance the sound of those tires pop.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh shit. And then the lights come on and you're like, oh fuck, we're so fucked. Like, it just falls on you the way that it falls on Moss. And so that's the kinds of sounds that I am making now, reacting to that thing. That's how the theater sounded. Like, as the different levels of like, he is so screwed, as those like descend, and therefore the sequence is escalating, right? As the sequence escalates, you're just reacting because the movie isn't reacting for you. Like, you have to react because it's just letting you stay in Moss's POV, and without doing any tricks to make you feel it harder than you already feel it. The movie trusts the audience so much. And if you're really with it, like, the only option is to like really respond in the moment. And then, like again, there's a million examples I could give of this where the filmmaking is just like, just telling the story like as flatly and plainly as possible. It feels like it's like, again, it's very cinematic, and there's no fat in it at all. It's like edited within an inch of its life. But it's so visceral, the experience of going on this journey with Moss, where he's barely making it one step ahead out of this in every scene.
So people were reacting to this movie throughout the whole thing in the theater, packed theater.
Oh yeah.
Yes. How did everyone ever react when it was over? When Ed Tombo wakes up.
Oh, I don't know, man. I don't remember like how the theater generally reacted. I remember I was like frozen in my chair. Because that was back in the days when I was very obnoxious and always insisted on sitting through the whole credits of a movie that I really liked.
That is not obnoxious. That is what should be done for everyone who sees a movie.
Thank you. You're with me. If it was a movie that I really liked, especially one that I felt like had a lot to absorb, like a lot of meaning to absorb, I just wanted to sit there and watch the whole credits. And so I know that that's what I did or wanted to do. I don't remember if the dude I was with was into that or not. I have no idea. I will say, to his credit, he's obviously not a person I know anymore, and barely knew then. But he was like with me, man. Like we weren't talking during the movie, but he was like in the same way that I was, like really reacting and everything.
That's cool.
But I do remember immediately understanding that what I had seen was a masterpiece, and that it was a masterpiece because what it was doing was theme to its very core. And I had never really seen an example at that time, and have seen very few since, of the very form structure of the movie doing theme. That doesn't happen very often because audiences don't like it or they don't respond very well to structural, like, to their expectations in terms of structure being subverted and used against them. Audiences tend not to like that because we have, even if you don't have the words to describe like narrative structure, you do have an innate sense of it, built up from a lifetime of being told narratives. And so when narrative structure itself gets broken, we go, why would you do that? And we like assume there's something wrong with it, instead of it's doing that on purpose to make us uncomfortable, or in this case, to drive home a theme. So, but I remember walking out of the theater and being like, oh my God, they broke the narrative structure to do the theme. They broke the narrative structure to do the theme. Holy shit. And like, I was like saying that to people. I was like, did you see what they did? Oh my God, they did it. Those last 4 scenes, what? Like,
and were other people with
right
you
away.
or they were like, you're crazy?
I don't remember exactly at the time. I think as dialogue about the movie went on, it had been out several months and most people had seen it at that point. I was able to get more people on board with me. But I do remember just immediately what they had done to me clicked instantly of like, oh shit, like you just did that. You just ended your movie that way with those last 4 scenes. That each one of those last 4 scenes breaks your expectation of a narrative, like what is supposed to happen in the narrative in a very specific, very uncomfortable way that is driving at the theme. And I knew that had happened to me. And my breath was absolutely taken away. And I was like, I will never forgive the Coen Brothers and I think about this every time I watch it. The shot where Shiger walks out of Carla Jean's house and looks at his goddamn boots. I will never forgive them. Because it was all I was holding on to. I was like, Carla Jean's got to make it out of here, man. Like, I need somebody to make it out of here. And it should be Carla Jean. And then he walks out and he looks at his shoes. And I just remember like my heart breaking in two. And I was like, no. And you did it like that. You showed it to me like that. And I just hate you forever for how good it is. Like, and also because of how sad it makes me. It's so masterful.
Okay, hold up. Don't go anywhere. This is a super painless interruption, I promise. If you're looking for a great way to help support the Film Nuts podcast, please consider becoming a patron, like Richard. He decided to back the show on Patreon after our Twin Peaks episode with Jace Lakop. Richard loves Twin Peaks and really appreciated just how much Jace loved Twin Peaks too. When you become a patron, you get lots of cool perks, like early access to episodes and behind-the-scenes goodies. Plus, your small monthly amount will mean big things for the future of the Film Nuts podcast. So thank you in advance for considering becoming a patron, and thank you, Richard, for becoming our latest backer on Patreon. For more information, please check out patreon.com/filmnuts. Okay, now, back to the good stuff. Every time I've watched this movie, I have felt differently about it. The first time I watched it, I was in the theater. There weren't a lot of people there. I went with a friend of mine. And at that point, I had just discovered that like film was like an art form. And there was more to it than just like watching stuff blow up. Cause like I love movies all my life. I just go to have fun. Like I didn't really think deep into anything. And then when I got to college, started taking like courses about it. I was like, oh, there's more going on than I think. So I remember seeing it and I remember not completely getting it, but knowing that it was something special. And then I showed it to some family members and they didn't dig it. And I think that made me go, oh, maybe I don't really like this movie.
Were you Team There Will Be Blood that year?
I did. I also see them. I felt similarly about that. I was like, I don't know what I think of this, but I think it's special. Like there's something about it that is important and that I witnessed something that was a high form of some expression. But recently, the more recent times I've watched No Country for Old Men, I'm like, okay, everything is clicking for me now. I understand what's going on. This is awesome. Like I had it. I own it. I bought it a while ago because I was like, oh, this is a good movie. I'll buy this. And then the more I watch it, I'm like, oh, fuck, this movie's brilliant. Like it's not, it's not a good movie. It's a fucking great movie. Like that's how I felt about it the more I watched it. Yeah. And I remember what really got me into this movie was Shiger's cattle prod weapon of choice.
Oh, shit.
I was like, what is this thing? And I was like, oh Yeah.
Oh,
I have
Yeah.
never seen anything like this.
Howdy. What's this about?
Step out of that car, please, sir.
What is that?
I need you to step out of that car, sir.
What is that for?
Would you hold still, please, sir?
That is one of the first use of it is one of my favorite scenes. What is your favorite
really?
moment or scene from this?
because there's the really violent bits of this. I don't watch them actually. Like I just like look up at the corner of my screen because they upset me so much.
Like
and
what's
fortunately,
the
I know
threshold?
right where they are.
What's the threshold? Like what are the scenes where you're like, I'm not gonna watch this one?
I always look away when he busts into the room, the hotel room, and like blows three of those guys away or whatever, or four of them, however many. I just look away right when those like gunshots hit, because it's pretty graphic, and I really don't like that one with the cattle slaughtering device. That first one, like I mean I appreciate what it's doing, but I just don't watch that exact moment. Although I did watch it this time. I typically don't. I just like blink long or something. And this time I was
Blink.
like,
I like that.
I do a little long blink.
Slow blink.
Yep. Because I know right what it is, right? Like I have this movie basically memorized, so it's fairly easy not
and
to
it
look
happens
directly at
it
it.
happens in half a second.
It's a split second, yeah. Although I did watch it this time, and it wasn't as graphic as I remember it, although it still is pretty graphic. For the record, I think that violence in movies like this, I feel is like deeply in service of the story and of the themes, and I don't think it's handled in any way that is like excessive. So I think it's told at just the right amount of like violence on screen. Like I think you need this amount of blood on screen. I don't think you need more. And as I said, I think some of the more devastating moments of violence and death in this movie are off screen or like shown very like from a wide distance or whatever. Yeah. So, you know, Carson Wells' death is not on screen per se. And I still find it really upsetting because we don't need to see that for it to convey what it needs to convey. So, you know, but then when you also have the scenes of like, in terms of like actual blood and gore or whatever, like you have the scenes of both Sugar and Moss like patching themselves up. And we see a lot of their injuries. I think all of that is really carefully done and is doing something important. And so I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I think violence in movies extra disturbs me when it's gratuitous or doesn't feel like it's actually in service of something specific. That being said, there's a run of dialogue scenes in the second half of the second act that I think are sort of like all my favorite taken together because they're just so, oh God, the movie just really hits a stride. I mean, it's so good all the way through. But after the midpoint encounter where Moss and Sugar meet at the Eagle Hotel.
Yeah. Great scene.
And wound
So
each other. Oh, it's an amazing sequence. There's like 4 dialogue scenes in a row that are just like some of the best dialogue ever written and delivered, I think. I don't know. There's the one where I think probably my favorite one is the one where Moss wakes up and Carson Wells is sitting right next to his bed with flowers.
Oh, in the hospital? Yeah.
Yeah, I know how it's found me.
It's called a transponder.
I know what it's called. He won't find me again.
Not that way.
Not anyway.
Took me about 3 hours.
Yeah, well, I've been mobile.
No, you don't understand. What do you do?
I'm retired.
What did you do?
Welder.
Settling, MIG, TIG,
Any of it. If it can be welded, I can weld it.
cast iron?
Yeah.
I don't mean braze.
I didn't say braze.
Pop metal.
What did I say?
Were you in Nam?
Yeah, I was in Nam.
So was I.
So what does that make me, your buddy?
Josh Brolin and Woody Harrelson's performance, especially Woody Harrelson's performance in that scene, they're just like everything to me. Like I think it's so pitch perfect. And and how quickly they kind of go back and forth, where he's like, what do you do? I'm retired. What did you do? I'm a welder. He's like, MIG, TIG. He's like, if it can be welded, I can weld it. He's like, braze. Did I say braze? Like, it's so, like, I don't know. It's great. And then the moments where that dialogue has that rhythm to it, and then you'll get a moment where Woody Harrelson stops and just goes, you don't understand. Like, and it's, you know, really trying to convey the situation that Moss is in to him. And I just think it's so, these two incredible but like understated performances, and the dialogue is like a blast just to listen to. And then the one right after that, I think it's right after that, where Belle goes to see Carla Jean, and he tells her the story about the farmer who like hits himself accidentally in the shoulder with a bullet.
Here old Charlie's got one all trussed up, all set to drain him, and the beef comes to, starts thrashing around. 600 pounds of very pissed off livestock. You'll excuse me. Well, Charlie grabs his gun there, shoots the damn thing in the head, but with all the swinging and the thrashing, it's a glance shot. Ricochets around, comes back, hits Charlie in the shoulder. You go see Charlie, he still can't pick up his right hand for his hat. The point being that even in the contest between man and steer, the issue is not certain.
Tommy Lee Jones's performance in this whole movie is like unreal. It's so
I could
good.
listen to him narrate anything
all day
with that performance. Like, it's so good.
Oh, yes. Yes. Even just the opening sequence where has that monologue over the sunrise, you know, that those landscapes. Yeah. Every word of that is amazing. And I do want to say, I have read, because you're going to get, if I don't say this, all of your listeners are going to be mad.
Okay.
But I have read Cormac McCarthy's novel several times. I am aware of the fact that most of the dialogue in this is lifted verbatim out of Cormac McCarthy's novel, and that the Coen Brothers did not write it all themselves. I do know that. And that is part of the reason, if not the whole reason, why it is so very, very good. You know, the Coen Brothers have said, yeah, it took two of us to write this because one of us had to hold the book while the other one typed. Like, I do know that this is a very faithful adaptation of the novel.
Yeah.
And I do really like the novel also. So just putting that out there. But yeah, I think the dialogue is so lean and so effective, and just like no word of it is wasted. And at the same time, no line of it is like mundane or feels like a line of dialogue you've ever heard before in any movie ever. Like, and part of that is like the studiedness of the world and like the colloquialisms and the characterization and the way that the characters express themselves that feels so unique and specific. And then part of it is also, again, just how spare it is. And it just gives you barely enough. I love it.
The exchanges for me, I think, you touched on a kind of colloquialism. Like, it makes everything that's happened in the movie action-wise seem so ordinary because it goes along with how just people talk to one another.
Right. And I was struck this time. I love Wendell, the deputy.
Garrett Dillahunt. I forgot he was in this movie. I was so happy to see him.
He's so good too. But it's interesting, the characterization of that character, because when he and Ed Tom Bell go out to the site of the drug deal the first time, you kind of expect him to be less hardened, right? Like sort of less seasoned, kind of a younger, dumber, like more maybe naive.
It's like an archetype
character. Yeah. Because we're used to seeing that. But I love the way that it's written and played, where he actually is very astute and not easily fazed.
Oh, hell's bells. They even shot the dog. Well, this is just a deal gone wrong, isn't it?
Yeah. Appears to have been a glitch or two.
What calibers you got there, Sheriff?
9mm. A couple 45 ACPs. Somebody unloaded on that thing with a shotgun.
How come you reckon the coyote ain't been at him?
I don't know. Supposedly a coyote won't eat a Mexican.
These boys appear to be managerial. I think we're looking at more than one fracas.
He is like the right person for Ed Tom Bell to talk to because he's not stupid. The Coen Brothers are so good with their supporting characters, and Wendell's no exception. None of the supporting characters are here. Like, they're all so good.
If you had to, speaking of these characters, like if you had to identify with one of these three characters, who would it be and why? Ed, Tom,
Oh, boy.
Anton, or Llewellyn?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say Anton Sugar. No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Hey, I think there's some
What?
validity if someone said that. If they're, especially if they're, I mean, they're not a serial killer. but it'd be
Actual
like,
psychopath. No,
yeah, like
thanks.
if someone, yeah, it'd be like, you know, some people are like the believers of like the chaos thing. Like it's the nihilism part. Like that, I could see
Sure.
that happening. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I understand. If
I
you
was
don't
gonna
wanna
say,
take
if
him,
someone says that to you on your show, end the interview immediately. Just be
I gotta go. I'm
and
sorry.
that's all the time we have for today. I'm definitely a lot more like Llewellyn than Ed Tom Bell. Like Ed Tom Bell is designed to represent, you know, something, and that's a deeply held belief in like order and justice, and I wish, like, I respect him, and I like wish that was the world. I wish I lived in Ed Tom's world. But even Ed Tom doesn't live in Ed Tom's world, which is what the whole movie is about, him realizing. And I hope that I'm like Llewellyn, who just takes the world as it comes. You know, he is an opportunist. He does not do the right thing, you would say, by taking the money, but who's to say, right? If that is a right or a wrong thing. He doesn't hurt anybody to get it, right? A lot of us draw the line there, and he doesn't hurt anybody to get it. And he just walks away with it. And the only people that he hurts are people who are trying to hurt him first. So I think for a lot of us, it's definitely he's mostly a quote unquote good guy that we would consider to be, but he certainly is not, again, the like absolute by the book, kind of a law follower. And so I think, which I think that Llewellyn is just sort of, and pretty good at taking the world exactly as it is presented to him. And I think that's a smart way to be, even if it's not very noble.
I think I would want to identify with Llewellyn, but I think in actuality, I'm probably am more like Ed Tom Bell. I think because I think it's that feeling of being overwhelmed by what the world is. I think that's where it gets me. Like watching this now, like in the year 2023, I'm seeing things a lot more from Ed Tom Bell's perspective. I'm like, man, I get it. Like I'm tired too. Like I'm, you know, and he doesn't come out and say he's like scared, but his actions indicate he's watching his step. Like he doesn't want to take any unnecessary risks. Like he wants justice, but at the same time is not like really gonna like go full like vengeance or vigilante mode on it to try and do. He's just kind of he's done. He's basically done with being he's identified as a sheriff or highway, Texas highway. Is it Texas highway? Can't remember.
He's a sheriff.
Okay, sheriff. And
He's
so
the sheriff in Terrell County.
that's what it is. There. Oh yeah, that's what it is. And yeah, I was like, I get it, Tommy Lee.
Yeah.
I get it, man.
I mean, he is very clear to your point earlier about he's not scared. He's very clear in his opening monologue that he is not afraid, right? He said, well, not afraid for his life.
The crime you see now, it's hard to even take its measure. It's not that I'm afraid of it. I always knew you had to be willing to die to even do this job. But I don't want to push my chips forward and go out and meet something I don't understand.
He says the line is like, a man would have to put his soul at hazard. That's right. It's not, you know, I very much feel that, like, to to really look full in the face of what the world is, the chaos and the inevitability of like death and senseless violence, all of this stuff, is to look at that with your eyes open, is to put your soul at hazard. And I sympathize with not wanting to do that. And or just hoping that it's not that way, right? Like I feel like that's where Ed Tom lands, where he you know, when we hear about his final dream and he describes the light in the horn that his father is carrying as he sees it in the dream, and he's like, you know, I saw that my father was going on ahead and I knew that he was going to make a fire out there in all that dark, so that, you know, it would be there when I got there, basically. That's a comforting thought, right? That's a hope. And we see Ed Tom, like, he really, it takes a lot to push him to let go of that hope for that. He goes back to that hotel room. He certainly does not have to, right? Yeah. He goes back there to try one last time to do something, even though Moss is already dead. He's like, there's one more thing I can do, and I can go back to this hotel room and see if I can find the guy or find the money or do something. And he does try it, and he puts his life at risk, and puts his soul at hazard to go do that. And there isn't, it turns out, by dumb luck, that nothing comes of that action that he takes. Yeah. And he even is like very unwilling. He doesn't seem like he takes the decision to retire lightly either. It seems like it weighs really heavily on him, but again, he just eventually gives up. And you know, the conclusion of the movie is, and then I woke up, right? Yeah. I had this hope, and then I woke up.
When he rode past, I seen he was carrying fire in a horn, the way people used to do, and I could see the horn from the light inside of it, about the color of the moon. And in the dream, I knew that he was going on ahead. And he's fixing to make a fire somewhere out there in all that dark and all that cold. And I knew that whenever I got there, he'd be there. And then I woke up.
Which is very sad, but again, is something that a lot of people walk around every day. Most people do, holding on to that same hope, because it's much easier. It's much easier than just like living in like the darkest, most nihilistic place that you can. Yeah. Right? It's a lot of us sleep better when we're when we think there might be meaning at the end of it all.
Yeah. I agree 100%. Like, I think I've heard, if I heard correctly, I was re-listening to the Behind the Screenplay episode on this movie, and I believe you said something along the lines of that every time you watch this movie, that kind of the philosophy of it has hit you in a different way, has affected you in a different way. Based on your most recent rewatch, what is that effect?
I think I've ultimately probably drawn similar conclusions about the world to the Coen Brothers. Like, I guess I probably am a nihilist at heart, but I think that the Coens, at least in this movie, portray the reality of like that meaninglessness as something deeply tragic and also deeply difficult. Like, this movie is designed to make it hard to accept, even if it is crystal clear, right? Like, the philosophy of the movie in my mind is crystal clear in where the movie lands on everything. But the movie makes it, like, as I said, it really wrestles with it. It is not cheaply arrived at. And like, I don't know, I think, one of the scenes that struck me this time is the one after the car accident. And the two boys come up.
Are you all right? You got a bone sticking out your arm.
What did you take for the shirt?
hell, mister. I'll give you my shirt. Look at that fucking bone.
Tie this for me. Just tie it. Just tie it.
Oh, hell, mister. Okay, I don't mind helping someone out. It's a lot of money.
Take it. Take it, and you didn't see me. I was already gone.
He takes the money anyway, even though he was perfectly willing to give away the shirt on his own back to a psychopathic killer who unfortunately survived a car accident. I was so mad when he walked away from that car accident the first time I saw this movie. I was like, how dare you, Coens? But some of the audio that we hear as Chigurh is walking away is that the two boys start to argue about the money.
Oh, yeah.
They do. So it's like, Caleb Landry Jones goes like, half that money is mine. And he's like, well, but you still have your damn shirt. Like, they immediately start arguing about the money. And I think it's really the greed that's present in this movie. It's interesting, those two scenes, the one with the boys who give Chigurh their shirt, and then the one with the young men on the bridge where Llewellyn buys the coat off the guys that are coming back from Mexico. Mm-hmm. Those scenes are really similar. Mm-hmm. And the greed that's already like in the hearts of these like young men. Yeah. They represent, the next generation, and all we see from them is like greed and opportunism. Mm-hmm. And the movie is very careful to depict that as being the world that like Llewellyn and Chigurh live in. Mm-hmm. Again, it's very dark. But there's this, I think the movie understands or wants you as an audience member to feel the tragedy and like the sadness of how dark it all is. Whereas in some of their later movies, the one they made right after this, the Coens made Burn After Reading. Mm-hmm. And that movie is also about nihilism and senseless violence and like just sheer chaos and confusion and greed. It's about all the same things in so many ways. However, it's all played for laughs in that movie. And they do not seem to think it is tragic or sad in that movie, or at least that movie doesn't seem to think that all the nihilism is tragic or sad. And so I like this movie. I like the gravity that this movie has. I think it's more difficult for me when it's like all just supposed to be funny. It's all played for comedy in that movie. Right. And that to me is even sadder somehow. Like at least No Country for Old Men, the Coens are like, it's all meaningless. And isn't that awful? And isn't that difficult? Isn't that hard to wrestle with? And then like literally 2 years later, they were like, and isn't that hilarious? You're like, it was a quick turn. There on the same thematic conclusion, very different film.
So as someone who is, I guess, a nihilist at heart, to use your words, what is it like being a nihilist at heart who's also a parent?
And also a parent? Yeah. Oh God, you really came with the easy questions today, Tay. Well, first of all, I want to say that I was raised very conservatively, and my family's very Christian. And my family, now that I have and am raising, we all go to church every Sunday, and we are still Christian. Mm-hmm. There's like a big asterisk and a long footnote after that word. I just want to say that I don't have time to get into.
No, totally cool. You don't have to justify your faith to me. I'm just curious.
Well, what I'm saying is, these days when people ask me, I usually say that I'm a Christian nihilist, which is not a thing because those two things fundamentally don't really exist together. But what I mean is that some days I'm a Christian and some days I'm a nihilist.
I got you.
And so, but I think the thing that, if you do what this movie compels you to do, or if you fully, to me, when I fully understand it and read its text all the way down, if you then look straight at all of the darkness, chaos, the nihilism of the world, and the meaninglessness of all of it, probably, you still are, I'm going to go with blessed or gifted with life now. And like, we're not at the end yet. We are not Ed Tom Bell. We are not given the luxury of hanging up our spurs. I guess you can in your own like little heart, hang up your spurs, but you are here now and you have to live as though your choices matter, because there's no other way to live with the nothingness, if you don't pretend at least that they matter. And, I have 2 boys, and I get to make choices in raising them, and also getting just to spend time with them because they rule. I get to make choices that matter in the here and now. Do they ultimately matter? Probably not. But can they mean something to me now, right now, today? And in the very, very short course of our own lifespans? Then yes. And I hope that my sons draw meaning out of narrative, the narratives that, maybe we construct and are maybe a false hope, or just sort of like an unknowable, they have unknowable conclusions, right? But that doesn't mean that they can't do a lot of useful things in the present. Stories do a lot of useful things in the present, even if all of it, even if the structure of narrative suggests that there is meaning where perhaps there ultimately isn't. The meaning that we find in the structure of narratives does matter because it informs the way that we live. And we can live toward ideals and in line with values that are meaningful to the people and the communities that we live with. And so, like, long after we are gone, long after, in this movie, long after Ed Tom is gone and the West and all of these, the world of the story that stands in for our world, long after that, is gone, the choices that we make will do affect people that live on after us, right? And the shapes that stories and the world will take. So, we can't create like some kind of cosmic justice where there isn't any. Ed Tom tried in this movie and failed. And Lord knows that I would absolutely fail if I tried to create some kind of cosmic justice, but I can create this much more justice probably in my own life. And by using my life to advocate for this much more justice in my community. And I can teach my boys to do that too. And that's something that I really hope for. So that is hope. It's just not of the grand, afterlife variety.
No, I honestly think that's a great answer. Like, what can one person do in the scheme of a whole system or life or universe or whatever like that. So I think those concentrating on the moments, I think, is a perfect answer.
Well, and if you happen to be in the arts, everything that everyone does, for the record, like, creates a narrative and leaves behind a narrative. The story of someone's life, anyone's life, leaves behind a narrative that continues to affect the people that knew them. However, if you are in the position of writing yours down or painting it into a picture or snapping it in a photograph or putting it in a song or a play or whatever it is, if you happen to be in that position, then it's not just, it's not just your life. It's the things that you make that can continue to in theory, do some good or shape the world towards what we want it to be in the here and now. So that's also something that I have hope for.
This entire conversation has been awesome. I'm really grateful you decided to come on the podcast and talk about one of your favorite movies of all time.
Oh, well, I mean, you didn't have to sell me that hard. I love this movie.
Outside of all the technical and structural nerdy film stuff, the messages and struggles this movie has us think about are well worth pondering, I think. How do we grapple with a changing world that we don't understand? What good can we do in each moment of our lives? Why can't everyone value what I value? I'm surprised a movie can keep me on the edge of my seat while simultaneously having me question my own personal philosophy. It's kind of bonkers, but in a way that I really, truly appreciate. And if you've seen this film, and I hope you have by now, I hope you have that appreciation about it too. A huge thanks to Tricia for chatting with me about one of her favorite movies of all time, and a suitcase full of money-sized thank you to you for listening today. Please take a look at the show notes for links to some of Tricia's work, and please check out her podcast, Beyond the Screenplay, with her fellow hosts Brian Bittner, Alex Calleros, and Michael Tucker for conversational deep dive analyses of some of your favorite films. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please go ahead and subscribe on your favorite platform of choice. And if you happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and leave a rating and review so it gets us noticed by more awesome folks like yourself. If you want to help the show grow and want to get some access to some really cool perks, please consider supporting the Film Nuts podcast on Patreon. You can visit patreon.com/filmnuts or check out the link in the description below. Our theme this season is brought to us by The Deep End. Our artwork is designed by Modungwa Sibuhudi, and all episodes of the Film Nuts podcast are produced and edited by me, Taylor D. Adams. If you want to get in touch, you can email filmnutspodcast@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at filmnutspodcast. And don't forget to join the Nuthouse Discord community, absolutely free, by checking out the link in the show notes. Thank you all so much for listening today. I really do appreciate it. And here's hoping the decisions you make or the things you create help shape our world in a more positive way. Thank you.